I am joined from London, England, by I think my doppelganger, but we'll find out in a second. I just I mean you have way more hair than I do, but other than that, I think we're the same person, Mark Pennington. So Mark Pennington here is a professor of political economy and public policy at King's College London, and he is the author. Recently, it's not even released in the UK, is it yet?
They just emailed me yesterday to say it's been released like 3 days ago. The
Oh,
stock has finally arrived on this side of the ocean.
so this is breaking news. We are
Yeah,
we are on the cutting edge here. Brand recently, it was published in the U.S. a couple months ago,
in
so that's
June. Yeah,
that's why I know about it because I'm on top of everything here. So it's called, and people who know me at all pretty much will know why you're here. The name of your book is Foucault and Liberal Political Economy: Power, Knowledge, and Freedom. Mark, I told you before we started recording that I've had, I think, six listeners of this show message me in the last week telling me that I have to get you on the show. And each time I said he's already invited, don't worry about it. So, this book, your current project, this book, is it fair to say is an attempt to merge the classical liberal tradition or the libertarian tradition intellectually with the postmodern, but particularly the Foucauldian tradition? Is that like a good rough approximation of it?
yeah, it is. I mean, what I wanted to do is have a conversation between what I think are two mutually compatible schools of thought. So I want to show how classical liberals or libertarians can learn things from Foucault. But I also want to show how people in the Foucauldian tradition can learn things from certain strands in classical liberalism.
Yep.
So it's about having a conversation, which I think there are signs that towards the end of his career, Foucault is kind of moving potentially towards himself. But because he died, because various other things happened, that conversation never really took place. And it certainly hasn't taken place with most of his followers.
Right. And so most people who know me know that I've been banging this exact drum for about a decade now. Um, and trying to tell both sides exactly what you're doing. That, the
Yeah.
Foucauldian postmodernists have a lot to learn, certainly about economics and other things from libertarians, classical liberals, the Hayekian tradition, et cetera. But I think for me, maybe more urgently,
Yeah.
libertarians have a lot to learn about, I think, the sort of especially the cultural and psychological and psychodynamic
Yeah.
insights of Foucault and his tradition. So now that we know you're a complete weirdo and have no chance of like getting over, and by the way, you're about to be attacked. You know that, right? It's coming. There's going to
I do
be,
know that,
just get
yes.
ready. Yeah.
I've already had aspects of it happening.
If you come over here to the States, they're going to just flay you. They're going to draw and quarter you like the opening scene in in uh, in Foucault's book. So um, so let's start because of this. I think I wanted to start with you, and I think this will help frame our conversation because probably most people listening haven't read this stuff, and
Yeah.
you all should, and you should feel bad if you
Yeah.
haven't, but they haven't read it. So, and then that's one thing, and second thing about the audience is it's a mix of like libertarians and lefties, like because I have a
Right.
lot of socialists and Marxists here,
Yeah.
and some good old paleo conservatives too. So it's that kind of mix. Now, that means the libertarians, although if they listen to me, they're probably more sympathetic. But generally speaking, as I said, libertarians hate Foucault, or they hate what they think is Foucault. They
Yeah.
hate what they think is postmodernism. But so
Yeah.
what? Because of this, I want to begin with you, which is
Mhm.
actually a Foucauldian approach, right? Like tell the history of the thing. If you want to understand a current phenomenon, and you are the current phenomenon, all he
Yeah.
does is his only question is, well, what's the history of it? What's the origin? Where did this start? Right. So can you tell me? And yeah, go ahead. Like it's I'm dying to know.
Well, I mean, if we're truly Foucauldian, I guess you can't really find the origin completely. So it's
Mhm.
like some kind of complex set of factors. But I guess I've had an interest in him for about 25 years, maybe slightly longer than that. So it was really when I was doing my PhD and just afterwards. At the time, I was doing a lot of stuff in kind of rational choice theory, public choice theory, which I was sympathetic to, but I never found completely satisfying. And I was surrounded by a lot of people who were constantly using sort of Foucauldian concepts. And I felt I need to read this guy. I need to understand about it. So, I read Discipline and Punish was the first book I read, and then the first volume of the History of Sexuality. And immediately I saw in it what I thought were kind of at least implicit libertarian type sorts of themes. I didn't sort of agree with all of the line that he takes this, especially not in Discipline and Punish.
Mm.
But I felt this is something that I could work with. So at the back of my mind, like over time, I've sort of been sort of dipping into his ideas, engaging with them. And then over time, as my own interest moved away from rational choice theory to a more kind of Hayekian kind of view,
Oh.
which is very skeptical of scientism,
Uh-huh.
I started to think, well, there are even more parallels than I originally thought. So, Hayek has his critique of the pretense of knowledge, which I think has got many parallels, although they're not exactly the same thing, with Foucault's concept of power knowledge complexes and how they develop and how they can kind of constrain freedom. So all of these things have been bubbling away over 20, 25 years. And then because I was doing various other projects, I put them on the back burner. I just had them in the back of my mind. And then the COVID pandemic hit. And it just all crystallized for me. I felt I have to write a book that brings these perspectives together. And it wasn't only COVID, you see it in many other areas as well. The same kind of dynamics playing out, where you have, as Foucault would call them, certain discourses that seem to dominate, and then they get linked to various techniques of monitoring, surveillance, management that are kind of merging the private and the public sectors in a way that are closing the space for people to express themselves freely.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I have to write this book. And I'd gone through a period where I'd been a chair of department for 4 or 5 years. So I'd been a bureaucrat. I'd kind of been taken away from academic work. And I sort of felt I needed to reinvent myself as well
Mm.
to get out of that. So I thought I need to write this book. And it emerged.
So, that wasn't enough biography. I wanted to know,
Right.
so you come out of, well, so public choice, and I don't know much about it. I know it sort of from afar. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a, isn't, doesn't it, is there a libertarian or classical liberal thing? I mean, I didn't realize,
It is,
yeah,
it is, but so it's really so public choice theory is really a response to within neoclassical economics, you have constructs of market failure where you have various public goods problems or information asymmetries, this kind of thing. And public choice theory basically comes back and says the very same phenomena afflict the public sector in ways that many
right.
conventional economists simply ignore. They take the state as a kind of neutral agent that is not subject to the very same problems that they argue that markets are subject to. So I got into that, if you want more of the biography, I guess from my kind of intellectual development, which was I did a degree in geography at Royal Holloway College, which is part of the University of London, and I specialised in human geography. And that field is dominated or was dominated by Marxism, but latterly, you start to see more kind of post-structuralist influences
Right.
taking root. And during it, I mean, I just thought it was appalling the level of bias on the curriculum.
Mm.
So at that point in my life, I guess I was a bit of a kind of small c conservative.
Okay.
Um, I was very sympathetic to various environmental causes, which is why I was into geography in the first place.
Mm.
But I didn't like this kind of
Mm.
constant Marxist narrative. We were constantly told to read David Harvey about everything. And I thought, no. And I sort of rebelled against it. So I went into the library, and purely by accident, I stumbled on a copy of Hayek's Road to Serfdom.
Wow.
There's one issue of it which has got a wonderful image on it, which is of a painting called The Garden of Earthly Delights. It's just one issue. I think it's like the 1959 issue or something. But I really like the picture on the front cover. I read the back, and then I was hooked. I thought I can have a career attacking the people who've been trying to brainwash me.
Yeah.
So I went reading stuff on my own, and that's how I discovered public choice theory.
Okay.
And initially, I was
Oh,
attracted to it, but over time, my ideas sort of broadened out much more significantly.
wow. Okay, because I was kind of trying to place you in the context of UK politics, right? And
Yeah.
so when I heard that you were Hayekian, I mean, I know that the Thatcher movement was
Yeah,
it's some part, influenced by Hayek, but libertarianism, broadly speaking, is hard to find in the UK and in
yeah.
Europe in general, right? I mean, there's hardly any presence there. So you're sort of an oddball to begin with.
I am. I mean, there's quite a strong, or there was. I mean, it's arguably very weak at the moment. There was a very strong sort of classical liberal tradition that
Hmm.
was individualist. It wasn't libertarian in the US sense. So the kind of strong rights-based libertarianism doesn't have much resonance in the UK.
Mm.
But there's a kind of classical liberalism, even from people who are more conservative, sort of influenced by people like Michael Oakeshott, that was quite strong.
Hmm.
Um, and elements of that were influential in the Thatcher Conservative Party. But at that time, during the sort of Thatcher government, I wasn't really sort of politically as aware as I became.
Okay.
So I would say I felt like I probably was a small C conservative at the time. But then when I went to university, I became radicalized towards a kind of libertarian position,
Be- because of
really because
Marxism,
of my experience, because of Marxism,
reaction to
because of
Marxism.
Marxism.
Right.
Yeah, and reaction to the tutors that I had in many ways, because I was at university at the time when the Berlin Wall had just come down, and yet here you had people who didn't seem to be really reflecting sufficiently enough, it seemed to me, on the system that many of them were still kind of tacitly support.
Oh
There
yeah.
was no real internal critique. I mean, you did start to get some of that with the post-structuralists, who were anti-Stalinists and Foucault, arguably being part of that sort of movement. But
Right.
I still found it remarkable how we could be being taught by people in a period when the Berlin Wall had just come down, who were not, who were just railing against neoliberalism, even in the early 1990s. And
Right.
there was no real reflection on what was in their own ideology that might have actually produced what had happened in Eastern Europe and the Soviet bloc.
Right. Right. Yes. No. I mean, I had the same experience. It just took me about 20 years to to go through that process, but I did, and we're both here now. So yeah. So wow. Okay. So then you sort of became a Hayekian, and Road to Serfdom. When I first read that, I was a lefty socialist Columbia grad student, and I had to teach it for a class once, and I thought, wait a minute, I think I agree with every word in this thing. I love that book. I haven't read it in a while, but at the time, I
Yep.
just thought it was stunning, and that
Yep.
was the beginning of my really intellectually. That was the first book that really made me change because I realized that and here's the thing, everybody, I was interested in freedom. It turned out I didn't know that
Mm.
until then, but I realized that that's really what
Okay.
is my core value, my number one value.
Yep.
And now, which is an interesting term when you apply it to Foucault, and we'll get there. But yeah, so I'm wondering about you. Like, were you into freedom?
Yes, I was, because I was I'd always been into freedom, and also into, I would say, individualism.
Yeah, right,
So I am an individualist, and I think really the
right.
the thing that created that, even when I was in this kind of small C conservative phase, was my experiences at school.
Yeah,
So I hated at school the whole class being punished for the behaviors of particular individuals or groups of individuals.
right.
And I felt like this is a collectivization of responsibility
Wow.
that robs people of agency. I didn't articulate it in that way at the stage, but that's what I felt. And I thought, I shouldn't have to put up with this.
Yeah,
And it just had a lasting imprint on me. And I see so much of kind of that schooling mentality in broader sort of governmental structures.
yeah. So my first move was to realize I liked freedom, and my second move, which took me several years of reading and stuff, was to realize that individualism was the vehicle through which to get my freedom. Because exactly what you just said, so beautifully articulated, that collectivism, grouping me with others, right, placing me in some category by some external authority,
Yeah.
does what you just said, robs me of agency. Um, I would say of my individuality, but that actually doesn't get to it. It robs me of my agency. I am therefore constricted because I then have to abide by the rules of my group that I've been
Yeah.
placed into.
Yeah.
So, okay, man, that's great. Now, And so you're operating in the UK as an academic, and they must many of them hate you, right? Because they don't they're all Marxists and lefties and liberal Democrats and all this stuff.
I wouldn't say I'm hated, but it can be quite difficult. So where I used to work, so I used to work at Queen Mary College, which is another part of the University of London, and there I was, yeah, very much in a minority of. I think there were two of us who sort of believed in
Right.
capitalism in a department of sort of 15 or 20 people.
Wow.
But it was a very good atmosphere, actually. The people there were very
Good.
congenial, and we went out for drinks and argued and stuff. So that was quite fun. Um, King's College London, I've been involved in creating this Department of Political Economy, which we've tried to model on a kind of model of ideological pluralism and sort of methodological pluralism as well. It's a kind of PPE style department.
Fantastic.
And I'd say it's probably politically the most diverse department anywhere in the UK.
Wow.
So I'm quite lucky that I work in an environment that is more pluralistic than many people experience. But nonetheless, I know, yeah, sometimes I don't get invited to certain things, perhaps because of the views that I'm known to have that maybe I would be invited to if I didn't have these views. So there's a bit of bias, but you can deal with it.
So look what, yeah, so you look what you did. So my path was from freedom and then realizing that individualism was the way to get it. And then more specifically, decentralization, right? And pluralism.
Yeah,
The left would call it diversity,
yeah,
pluralism. So you've actually
yeah,
invented a little microscopic society as such, right? Um,
yeah,
okay. Now, so I think I got your biography well enough. Thank you for that. So let's go to the big moment, right? And which I think was a big moment for a lot of people. And I noticed in
yeah,
2020 and 2021, a lot of people rediscovering or discovering this guy Foucault. But why don't you tell
yeah,
me that story? So you're not into Foucault. You'd read him a long while ago,
yeah,
kind of put him on the shelf again, and then COVID
yeah,
happens in 2020.
yeah.
So just tell the story and first your reaction to the COVID regime and the politics of that year, the couple of years there, and then how did you